All right, welcome everybody to week one of Pro 211, which is a course on branding, our own personal branding. We'll be talking about a lot of different things in this course, all of which should be things that you can use both within your workplace to get additional opportunities and to get promotion, but also different things that might help you in your family life, relationships that you have, friendships, just in your personal life. So if you'll take it semi-seriously, I know first and foremost this is a class that you're just trying to get past, right? To get one step closer to your degree. But if you'll take it a little bit more seriously, it was not going to be a hard class, but you could come away with quite a few things that can help you in many different aspects of your lives. Not because I'm the one teaching it, but because the material is great. Every time I teach this class, every time I teach this mod, I come away with some new things that I can work on and do a little better to improve both my workplace environment and my family life as well. So I live in Provo, Utah. I've been teaching for 6 years. This is probably about the 100th class or so that I've taught online over the past 6 years. And most of the classes that I teach are about finance or business. And as my day job, I work at Zions Bank as a financial advisor here in Utah. And all that means is that people who are clients of the bank are able to use me for financial planning, for retirement planning, for investments, things like that. So I've been doing it for about 15 years as my day job. When it comes to financial services, I'm a certified financial planner. So that's a little bit about me. I've got two young daughters. My wife and I and our daughters have lived in the same house here for 10 years in Provo. And yeah, just enjoy it here. I've got a 3-minute commute to my work, and so I like the length of my commute, so we'll probably stay here long term. So that's a little bit of my background. As far as the class is concerned, we've got some kind of housekeeping issues that we'll cover here at the beginning. So an agenda for tonight is we'll cover a few of the basics, expectations for the class. Then we'll talk about some of the content as far as the required 2 articles on professionalism, and then there's also a short video on personality types. And then we've got a little bit more material on, kind of an expansion on that material to do from there. So we'll spend about an hour tonight, a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, doesn't really matter, approximately an hour each one of these weeks. One of the things that's most important that we come away with from each one of these classes is comfort level with this week's material. And speaking of this week's material, this class is a little bit different than other classes maybe that you've had. Maybe it's similar. Most of the pro classes just have discussion boards each week, and that's the majority of your scores. Majority of the points for the class come from discussion boards in the pro classes. In other classes, like your finance or management classes, those classes have assignments, tests, so the discussion boards end up just being a small part of what you're doing. But this particular class, as well as some of the other pro classes, you've got the majority of your points coming from the discussion board, which is a great thing in one way. You've got less to worry about, less to think about. And in another way, it's kind of a disadvantage because more than almost a quarter of your score each week, or excuse me, almost a quarter of your overall grade in the class comes from each week's discussion board. So just be very careful that you're putting in adequate time on the discussion board. One of the temptations in a class like this is because it only has a discussion board to spend a lot less time on the class. And while it may require a little bit less time, the idea is that you're going to spend more time than you normally would on a discussion board in another class that's got other types of assignments and assessments, okay? So most of your score comes from weekly discussion boards. Some of your score comes from checkpoints, and checkpoints are a great way to get extra credit. So just stay on top of them. Find a time each day that you can be on top of checkpoints so you can get that buffer, that extra credit that's available. When we get to the end of the class, and I'll have a few people every class that will email me and say, is there extra credit available? My first response usually is, did we stay consistent with the checkpoints? Did we turn everything in? Is everything completed? If you were consistent with checkpoints, if everything's been turned in, and you still need a few points of extra credit, then I'm happy to consider options. If you haven't been staying consistent with checkpoints and haven't turned everything in, there's not going to be an extra credit opportunity. But checkpoints can be a phenomenal buffer. They can make up for a little bit of maybe one of the weeks where the discussion board doesn't go as well for whatever reason, you can get up to a half a letter grade and extra credit just by staying consistent with checkpoints. So please, please, please stay on top of checkpoints. Stay on top of your discussions. That's going to be the 98% of your score. There's a small, what they call, career integration or development, quiz that's like 15 points in the final week. You've probably seen those before as well. Kia, is this your first online class, or is this just the next one? You've had some before this. And also, is this your first pro class, or is this just another pro class for you? And while Kia might be answering that, just want to thank you for coming. Appreciate people participating in the live sessions. It makes them more interesting for me, more entertaining for me. It may not for you all, but it helps me out to have somebody that I can interact with. So if you're willing to do that, I really appreciate that. Okay, so you've had plenty of pro classes before, and this is your 4th mod. Congratulations getting to this point. But yeah, should be no surprises as far as the minimum expectations for these pro classes. The majority, like I said, of your points just come from the discussions. Pretty straightforward. The thing you have to be very careful about in these mods where it's all about the discussion boards is because there are so many points available on the discussion boards, they've added a lot of different elements to each of the instructions. And what I mean by that is an instruction might tell you to interview a friend like it does this week and ask them about your personality strengths and weaknesses. But then the discussion board also asks you to, by requirement, read some articles on professionalism, watch a video on personality types, and it's expected that you've reviewed that material so that you can give some feedback from that material as well and integrate that material into your feedback based on the instructions for the board that week. There's also another component this week on the discussion board that asks about what kind of personality traits do you see in people that have what they refer to as kind of the golden touch, just somebody who's very successful in whatever they do. What types of personality, what elements of personality do you see in those people, and why do you think that is, and what's your feedback on that? So just in what I've just described very quickly, there are 3 very different parts to your initial main post. And if you don't get those 3 parts in the main post, or at least somewhere on the board this week, I can't give you full credit. Don't just pick and choose which instructions to follow. Read through very carefully all the instructions so that I can give you the points for each week on the board, okay? Is that fair enough? Is that clear, Kia? Any questions on that? Because one of the most common things that happens in a class like this where people don't get their full points on the discussion board is they just ignored part of the instructions, and unfortunately I can't give full credit if we don't follow all the instructions associated with the board, okay? But if you do follow all the instructions, follow the minimum expectations, I will absolutely give you full credit. Not difficult to get full credit, just has to be complete, okay? Complete and on time gets full credit. So as far as success in a class like this, bottom line is get your work done, turn it in, and you'll have success in the class. You'll easily pass it. If you don't get your work done, you will struggle to pass, and the most common consistent element of people who have not passed a class from me online over the last 6 years is just they don't turn in their work. They don't complete everything. And I understand and I realize that there are definitely issues that come up, right? We all have family issues, job issues, health issues, computer issues, connectivity issues. There's all kinds of things that can come up in just a short week, or excuse me, a short month, right, within a mod that can prevent us from doing and accomplishing all we'd like to do with the class. That just means and puts even more importance on staying up to date and trying to get your work done even a little bit early each week so you don't risk the potential of not being able to get something done because of issues that come up at some point. Just it takes some discipline, even with how busy all of our lives are and how many things you're probably trying to juggle. And I understand, all the things that you might be trying to juggle. I think a lot of your peers have similar situations where you might even be working 2 different jobs. You might be the sole provider and sole caretaker for children, or a parent or grandparent or somebody with special needs. I mean, there's all kinds of circumstances, health issues that can be coming up each week for all of us and for many of us. And while I want to be sympathetic and empathetic to, those different unique situations, I also know that if you'll stay on top of things and really plan your time and really put in the effort, there's just absolutely nothing that should be able to prevent you from getting just a discussion board done each week, right? So 2, 3, maybe 4 posts a week is all that's required. 2 different days of participation on the board, for full credit. Those are those minimum expectations as far as discussion boards are concerned. They're not difficult, but they do take a little bit of effort and planning, right? So consistent with other classes, Kia, that you've had, the situation is that, you've got to have 2 different days of participation on the board. You've got to have a post in by Wednesday at midnight. That's the main post. Okay, and each one of the sets of instructions will tell you what is needed within the main post. The post needs to reflect that you've read the required material. Okay, that's just part of the basic requirement for the content that you're providing within your discussion board each week. The discussion board will have some kind of minimum expectation for number of words, but frankly, in this class, it's usually very short. I'd rather you err on the side of writing too much than err on the side of barely having enough and not being able to explain your perspective. So and then if you get out all your posts in, whether or not it's 3 or 4, some weeks it's 4 posts that are required, but if you get them all in by Saturday at midnight and you followed the instructions and they're complete, and you have 2 different days of participation and everything's on time, you'll get full credit once again for the discussion board each week. And that's pretty straightforward. What I was going to say is discussion boards are meant to demonstrate both that you've learned something and that you've done some reading, right? Some of the required reading, but they're also a place where you can demonstrate that you've thought through things. The most important part of a discussion board, in my personal opinion, is that you demonstrate that you can form opinions about whatever the subject matter is that we're learning about, okay? So don't just regurgitate what you read. Don't just cut and paste from online. Don't just tell us the same stuff that all of us read, but think through what you've read, think through what it's asking about, and give your perspective, okay? I want to make sure that each and every week I see your opinions and perspective come through on the discussion board, because that's the point. We're supposed to be thinking about the content. If we're not thinking about it and forming our own opinions, then we're not accomplishing, we're not succeeding at what it is that those discussion boards are trying to do, okay? Shouldn't be stressful. Once again, just keep in mind that I have some nuance, maybe differences with other professors that you've had. How I feel about the discussion board, what my minimum expectations are, should line up perfectly with other professors, but I want to make sure that kind of 2 things that maybe don't come out in other classes that you've had. One is that you demonstrate that you've read the material, the required material. It's not a lot of material. It's not a boring textbook in this class. It's always going to be a few online articles or videos, okay? So first of all, try to integrate that material into every single week, that the required material that you're supposed to be looking at. And then secondly, make sure that you demonstrate that you've thought through this and formulated some kind of opinion on whatever it is that the topic is, okay? And you can do that through peer responses. You can do that through your main post, but just make sure that you're accomplishing, that every single week, that it's clear that you've formulated and at least thought through what your perspective or opinion is on whatever it is that we're discussing, okay? Excuse me. That was one of those sneezes where I knew it was coming for a few seconds, but I just didn't want to come. All right, so any questions about discussion boards, about anything that we've talked about to this point? All right, doing good? So one of the things that you've probably already noticed about this class and about me as a professor is that I will try to go as fast as I possibly can through the material. I still want you to understand. I still want you to get something from the material. I'll try not to talk so fast that you can't even keep up. But I also want to be, I guess, sensitive to the fact that many of these online classes, because they're online and not in person, if the person on the other end is just talking very slowly and all they're doing is communicating exactly what's on the slides, sometimes that can become, well, boring as far as I'm concerned. I've taken a lot of online classes myself. I got my MBA through Steven Senegar, actually, after I'd already gotten a master's in financial services. And one of the things that was consistent is that professors that spoke a little bit more at a little bit more rapid pace and were able to move through material a little bit faster on the sessions, I was able to keep engaged with those professors a little bit better during the sessions. The ones that went very, very slow through the material, sometimes I had a hard time staying engaged. So right or wrong, I realize that for some people you'd want me to slow down. I realize for other people they appreciate that it's faster, but right or wrong, that's my personality. That's how I teach. So I'll be going fairly quickly through the material, fairly quickly through the content. And if you needed me to repeat anything, I'm happy to. If you have any questions as we go through it, just jot them in, Kia, and just put them right into the comments, and I'll get to them as fast as I possibly can. Okay. So as far as communication in the class, email is very best. david.shipley@stevensenegar.edu is the best way to communicate with me. You're also able to call or text or voicemail to my cell phone. Having said that, because I have a day job for Zions Bank, I'm not able to take calls usually during the day when I'm in appointments or with clients. And so the easiest way is just to email me. But you're welcome, like I say, to text me or to call and leave a voicemail. Just know that I'm not avoiding you. It's probably just that I can't get to your call or text right that second, but I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Okay? An email within a day, you'll always get some feedback. If you have any questions or problems or get stuck on something in this class and you email or text me and you're not getting a response as fast as you need it, Natalie Butler is our learning coach. I've already posted her information. She's been a learning coach for many of the finance and pro classes that I've taught. I know that she's very responsive. However, one of the requests that she always makes is that if you wait until Saturday night in order to contact her because you're stuck, and this is true for me as well, it becomes fairly difficult for us to guarantee that we can respond within a timely manner. We have our own lives and families, and Saturday night we're not sitting around waiting for your questions to come in most cases. Sometimes we are, but in most cases we're not waiting for those questions Saturday night right before the due date on your assignments and assessments and discussions. And so I'd strongly encourage you to take a look at the instructions, take a look at the information early in the week if at all possible. And then if you get stuck on something or want a clarification, it's going to be very likely that early in the week between Natalie and I, we can get you answers right away, very, very quickly, because it's easy for us to communicate, respond early in the week. It becomes more difficult come Friday and Saturday night. Okay? That should seem realistic, as far as, the fact that Natalie and I, both have our own, lives as well, just like you do. And we can't be waiting around on Saturday night. A lot of times we have family things, or maybe we've gone to a movie or something like that on a Saturday night, or a concert or a game. And so we're not able to always wait around for questions and concerns. And sometimes we don't get to them, by midnight if they're emailed or texted at 10:30 or 11. Okay, which should make sense to everybody. But I just want to reiterate that and just encourage everybody to look early at the instructions, because if you've got any clarification or concern, early in the week is a really easy time to get good feedback from us. Okay. All right, that's it as far as expectations. What have you got to do this week? Of course, you've got your checkpoints. Thanks, Kia. I appreciate you being here, and like I say, I appreciate your feedback, and thank you for being supportive so far. You can also be critical if you want to. Sometimes when you're new to a class, new to a professor, new to a situation, obviously you don't want to question things, and you don't want to act concerned about anything. You're welcome to do that as well. I'm easy, and I think you'll find that I try to be fair about things. I'm not going to come after you if you have any questions or concerns or get stuck on something. So hopefully you just feel like I can help, and I'm here to help. All right, so for this week, of course, you've got your checkpoints, 5 points a day that are available, like we already talked about. That's a big part of what can become a significant chunk of extra credit, half a letter grade by the end of the class associated with checkpoints if you're consistent with them and have done them all. But this week, as far as discussion one, you've got a couple different things. You've got, as I mentioned before, some different distinct things that need to be accomplished for this week's discussion board. And I would jot down a few notes if I were listening to this, or Kia, if tonight, if if you're on this, I would jot down a couple notes just to make sure that even though I'm going to go and read the instructions, right, when it comes to this week's discussion board, I just want to make sure if I'm taking this class that I don't miss anything, that's required so that I get full credit. So we talked about how this week you're going to have an interaction or an interview with someone, and they're going to give you feedback on your personality, strengths and weaknesses. And then I would like you to give some feedback on their feedback, right? So you're going to be interviewing somebody that you know well, maybe a spouse or friend, close friend, maybe a sibling, maybe a child, somebody who knows you well, and we want positive, not even positive, but honest, both positive and negative feedback about our personality traits, okay? What type of personality we are, what kinds of advantages and disadvantages or pros and cons do they see about our personality, and be specific as they can. And that's why you want it to be somebody that knows you well and can be honest with you, right? People who don't know you as well might not be as willing to be honest, okay, about what they see. And they might not know, right? So we want somebody that's close to you. So that's the first segment, and you're going to report on that as part of your discussion. Then you're going to watch, of course, the video on your personality, personality types, and I want you to give some feedback about yourself as a required reading this week, that video, so that you can give a little bit of feedback on personality types, which personality type you feel like you fit into and why. And then it also asks you to give a little bit of feedback about, somebody that you observe as someone who's successful, that has what they refer to as kind of a golden touch. Just seems like whatever they do is successful. What kind of personality does that person have? What kind of personality traits does that person demonstrate? Okay, and just some feedback on that. Be detailed. Help me understand, what that person does or doesn't do, as far as their personality is concerned. Help me understand what you think about the feedback that you got from a close friend or family member on your own personality. And then make sure, like I say, and give me some feedback on the required readings and video for the week. Okay, so 3 kind of distinct separate areas that the instructions call for this week for the discussion board. Okay, like I say, don't worry about going too long on the discussion board. Concern yourself with being too short, and also concern yourself with, if you're only going to do 100 words, because that's what it calls for, just make sure that you've got all the elements that the discussion board is asking for and that I've explained are required, right? So if you get done with 100 words and you haven't done anything about, somebody with a golden touch, or about your interview, or about any of the material that you read that week that's required material, you just need to keep going, because it doesn't matter that the minimum's 100. You've got to satisfy all of the different aspects of the instructions each week, okay? All right. And then after week 1, when I give you some feedback on your score, I think it'll be a lot clearer, right? We're all kind of feeling each other out this first week. But I would err on the side of being more complete this week and more detailed, and then see what the feedback is after this week. And I think you'll find success. I think you'll find that you get the grade that you want if it's complete and detailed. Okay? All right. Any questions about this week's discussion board? So this week's coursework really comes down to, like I say, those 3 parts of the discussion board. Just make sure you get your main post in by Wednesday, and make sure you've got a couple different days of participation in 3 posts by the time we get to Saturday. All right. One of the questions that I get many times in a class like this, and we didn't cover just a minute ago when we were talking about expectations, is late work. Okay, I always get questions about whether or not people can turn things in late, and also get questions even after I've explained that you can turn in late work, with people asking and trying to give reasons for why they're going to be late, and try to, get me to give them full credit even though their work's going to be late. So let's be very clear about late work. First of all, I do accept late work all the way up until the final week, Saturday at midnight, and that's a hard cutoff for the course. So you can turn things in and submit things all the way up until Saturday at midnight in week 4. After Saturday at midnight, that's a hard cutoff from the school, right? So there's no exception to that unless you've gone through the school to get that exception, and that's very rare that they grant that. because they just have to move on to the next class, right? They've got classes that we have to transition to. We can't be spending our time on a prior module with prior students. So just keep in the back of your mind, okay, I've got some flexibility up until the end, but then in the end, on that final week, and I'll warn you this when we get closer to week 4, but you don't have any flexibility once you get to week 4. It's week 4, Saturday at midnight, it's over. Now, as far as late work is concerned, late work will never get full points, okay? So if you turn everything in on time, it's complete, it's detailed, like we've talked about, you're going to get full credit. If you turn it even a day late, I can't give full credit for late work, okay? But I will give most of the credit. You'll get a slight discount depending on how long it's been since you should have turned in your work. But it's one of those things that even if you were to turn everything in week 4, if you did a good job and it was all complete, you'd still pass the class. You probably wouldn't get an A. In fact, it would be very unlikely that you'd get an A in the class. If you want an A, you need to turn things in on time. But if you're just trying to pass the class, just make sure and do it all. Maybe you can't get everything in on time every single week, but make sure you get everything done, and so that you can pass the class. That's really good to hear, Kia, because what ends up happening if you get behind and get late, even though I just told you you can pass the class and you can turn things in late if you'd like, the challenge with that is the people who procrastinate and put everything off until the final week, they find themselves in circumstances where they just don't have enough time sometimes to get it done, right? They get a time crunch right there at the end, they can't get everything done, and boom, they're not able to pass. And I would hate for that to happen to anybody. The other thing is, a class like this, you're really getting the most from the class when you're able to interact live time, right, during the week, each week, with your peers. If you're not able to get feedback from your peers the week that you do it on the discussion board each week, you're missing out on a big part of how we learn and develop from a class like this, and how we get perspective and experience from a class like this. A big part of that is being able to interact on the discussion board, right, with peers and get feedback and give feedback. Those things all help us to solidify the information in our mind. So for what it's worth, you'll get a lot more from the class if you stay on top of your work throughout, and you'll also not risk potentially either not getting the grade you want or not passing altogether if you were to run out of time. So while late work is accepted, I would strongly encourage you to follow Kia's example and make sure and stay on top of things. Yeah, question on the interview. What can we do for you, Kia? No. Kia just asked, do we have to ask questions based on the material we've read or viewed? There's just the one video, right, on personality types, and frankly, I wouldn't mind if you hadn't even read that, or viewed that particular video. It's just a short little video. Yeah, you're just coming up with your own questions, but you don't even need to worry about a lot of different questions. All you're asking is, you're asking somebody that you know well what they see as your personality traits. That's it. So you just want them to talk about your personality traits, good and bad, right? And that's it. So you don't need to come up with a long interview. There's not a lot of information associated with it, but as much detail as they're willing to give you, that'd be great. And like I say, the more you know that person, or the more that person knows you, I should say, the better the interview can be, because it's going to be short either way, but we want them to provide as much information and as many details as they possibly can about our personalities. Okay? And they don't need to, they don't even need to know the personality types, right? They don't have to know that at all. They can talk about our personality however they want, right? In their own language. And it's our job then, after we get that information from them, after we take some notes about what it is that they have to say about our personality, then it's our job to talk about those traits, give feedback on what you think about their feedback, right? whether or not you agree or disagree, or just some background on different information that they've stated about your personality. But then also, that's then on the discussion board where you transition into, okay, and then this video that was required for the discussion board, here's how my personality probably fits within those 5 personality types that the discussion board talks about. And you could agree or disagree with the traits that the person that you interviewed tells about you. But one of the things that I think is really important, and I think great about this interview, is that it will help you to be more self-aware. And anything that we can do in life to become more self-aware, even if it's a little bit scary, a little bit dangerous, because you can get the negative, right, with the positive. But anything that we can do to make ourselves more self-aware and just really honest with ourselves is I think a positive. It allows us to grow when we know what we're not as good at. It allows us to celebrate things that we are good at. When we understand, and people that know us well can help us become more self-aware. Sometimes we don't see things in ourselves, right, that other people see from the outside. So it might be something where you discover some new things. What people think about you. It might add some color to how people view you. Okay. All right, let's move on then. So a couple key concepts that we want to talk about tonight. We're going to talk, as much as we have time for, these 5 basic concepts within tonight. And what I wanted to do before we get started with, kind of digging down on each one, is just to make sure and define what we're talking about. What is it when we talk about personality? What are we even talking about? The video that's on the required reading this week defines personality as those traits that become consistent in our lives. That they define us. They define what our personality is. The traits that are most consistent or most evident in our lives. And so, if somebody's going to define your personality, they're going to talk about your traits, right? Things that you do or don't do, ways that you act, ways that you interact. Those are things, those are habits or traits that become evident when you interact with someone, right? That's their personality. So that's the definition we'll go with. I'm sure there's lots of other definitions, but basically we're just talking about the traits that become evident, and come to the surface when you interact with people. And when you live your life, that is what makes up your personality, those different traits. And those traits can really be defined by what you value, right? And the values that you have. So what are values? Values are things that we hold important. So just like the word, the connotation of the word is that something of value is something of worth, right? Well, you and I, if we value something and think it's worthwhile, then that becomes important to our personalities usually. So if we feel like it's important to be honest, right, or it's important to work hard, those are values, maybe things that we really value and hold in high importance, then those things can work their way into our personality, right, and become personality traits of ours because we're focused on those as values, as important things. Self-efficacy. This is something that maybe is a little more flowery, it might be language that you don't normally hear. A more simple term that you could put here in place of self-efficacy is confidence. Okay, somebody with confidence. It's definitely not ego or arrogance, but it's a calm confidence in oneself. Okay, self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is believing that you can accomplish what it is that you need to accomplish. So if you work with someone as on a team and they just seem to, not, once again, it's not about arrogance. They may be arrogant, but it's not about that. It's about a confidence that if you give them a task, that they will figure it out, that they can accomplish it, that they feel confident that they can do things, right? And some of us have a lot of self-efficacy and some of us have very little, or feel like we don't have any. We're always anxious about our ability to do something, our abilities to do anything. And that can be something we have to work at, right? That can be something that we need to put ourselves in environments where we're really able to succeed, instead of putting ourselves in environments where we struggle or just are challenged by the environment so much that we can't succeed, okay? So self-efficacy can be something that we develop over time. Self-efficacy can be something that is helped through nurturing from good people, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, employers, managers, friends. They can help our self-efficacy or our confidence based on how they communicate with us, right? And how they reassure us of what we're doing. But most of it comes internal, and it has to do with our how we think and talk to ourselves about our ability to accomplish. Okay, so it's an important concept when it comes to, it's an important aspect of our personality. It's an important aspect of us as an employer within an employee situation. We're going to talk a little bit about professionalism tonight. There are two different articles, and they're both articles where it's kind of a do's and don'ts article. They're not really a traditional article in the sense where they're going to talk through, you know, the details of professionalism. They're more, hey, here are things that you should do to be professional, and here are things that you shouldn't do. So just a nice little checklist in both cases. Very short articles in both cases on professionalism on the required reading this week. Both websites, and they're very, very easy to read through. But I think if you'll have an open mind about it, both articles will touch on something maybe that you can improve within your workplace for yourself. You know, some of them are just things that we don't even think twice about, that come very naturally to us. Other things are just things that we might be completely oblivious to. We might not even think about unless we, you know, concentrate on it, unless we try. And that's something that sometimes professionalism requires of us a little bit of effort. And then if we get some time at the end, I'd like to talk about some different career success principles that have to do with personality and professionalism. So we'll see if we get to that point, but that's kind of the overview, and those are the definitions of different things we want to look at. Any questions about what personality, values, self-efficacy, what those are before we get started? So we've kind of already defined personality. Once again, the video defines it, but basically it comes down to traits, right? Just our traits make up our personality. Whatever it is that we exude, that we demonstrate through how we act, through how we interact, that becomes what our personality is. Even if we want it to be something else, from an outside perspective, our personality is going to be how we act and what we do. And so where does it come from? Kia, any ideas on where our personality comes from? Any guesses or any perspective on where you think our personalities are developed or where they come from? Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things we talk about in psychology a lot, you know, when you learn about psychology, is nature versus nurture. When we say nature versus nurture, we talk about our environments. That's our nature, right? That's the nature around us. That's the different experiences, life experiences that happen to us as we grow. And then nurture, those are the people around us and how they interact with us. So some people's personalities you could look at and say, wow, their personality is very similar to their parent, right? And so then we'd be talking about nurture, right? They were nurtured into that personality. Then other people, you'd say, wow, they're nothing like their parents, but this life experience or that life experience really, you know, changed them, and they're very different from their parents because of life experiences. That would be more about nature, right? Most of us have some nature and nurture, you know, elements to our personality, right? Something that may break with what our parents are or what they're like as far as their personalities. And then we have other things that our parents, grandparents, whoever helped raise us during our formative years, right, in growing up, those things are more on the nurture side and can be a significant part of our personality as well. Many people's personalities change somewhat after they might get married or have children, or, you know, even get a certain job and work in a certain work environment, right? Because those things can have significant impact. Maybe it's a religious affiliation, you know, maybe they convert to a certain religion, and that does have a significant impact sometimes on people's personalities and how they act, right? What traits are demonstrated, what personality traits are demonstrated. So the question is, Kia, can we change our personality? And I've already just mentioned, yeah, I mean, personalities can change over time, right, based on nature and nurture, okay? And how do they change? We've talked about, well, different experiences can affect your personalities. Some people find it very, very difficult though, okay? Especially, the kind of old dogs, new tricks concept. We talk about how it's hard to teach an old dog a new trick. If you've had a personality, your personality, of course, is a combination of all the years of experience and of both nature and nurture. Sometimes when we get into our older years, our personalities tend to be impacted less by experience. Where if somebody, let's say back in the day, they were demonstrating against the Vietnam War, maybe they were raised as a certain political, tendency, and then because of that war, a lot of people changed, what their, what was important to them, what they valued, and that had a material impact on their personality. So different life events can definitely change personality, can put you on a different track from a values and personality standpoint. And it tends to happen less, or at least more gradually, as we get older, right? Our personalities tend to change less dramatically as the older we get. They can change very dramatically at a young age. You think of, kids in elementary school, junior high, and high school. One day they can be a certain personality, as far as we're concerned, have a certain type of friends, and the next day it seems like they can just be a complete chameleon with whoever they're hanging out with, and they can be completely different, from one day to the next. But that tends to happen less and less as you age. So one of the things that we're talking about this week on the discussion board are what personality traits breed success within careers. And this is something we'll talk about on, within the discussion board, that we want you to think about, when you observe other people that tend to have success. But Kia, can I just ask you real quick, what do you think are some consistent personality traits, if any? Maybe there's no consistent personality traits between successful people, but what kind of personality traits do you think successful people probably have? I'll give you a minute to think about that. A lot of people, yeah, I was going to say, a lot of people, their first thought is they're driven, they're determined, they work hard, they're smart. Those are kinds of things that we might, all equate to successful people. And that could absolutely be true. Maybe they're all those things. And then it seems like, though, you can find somebody that's highly successful that kind of breaks all those, right? Very different from the mold. So there are definitely exceptions, no matter what we think defines, the normal successful person, or a successful person that we know of. There are definitely people that break that mold and are very different from what we think are, the stereotypical successful personality traits. But there are some traits that tend to be consistent. A lot of people who are very successful work real hard at it. A lot of people who are very successful, for example, might wake up early in the morning. As crazy as that sounds, that might be a personality trait of theirs. They might wake up early and accomplish early in the day. A lot of people who are successful might be learners, right? Always trying to learn new things and figure out things. They tend to be inquisitive or willing to pick up new things and learn new things. They're excited to learn. So anyway, there might be some things that you see and that we can discuss on the discussion board this week that are consistent personality traits among highly successful people. But you might also find, like I say, some of these exceptions where you find somebody that's highly successful but doesn't really hold a lot of those stereotypical success traits. And then it would be interesting to discuss, okay, well, how, if those are the things that create a lot of success for people, how did this person become successful? What's their story? And what aspect of their personality did it allowed them to have the kind of success that they're having? So I think it's an interesting exercise. I think it's an interesting, once again, an exercise that helps us to become more self-aware, meaning not necessarily that we're the one that's highly successful. We're looking at outside, right? We're looking at somebody else, but going through the personality traits of those people who are highly successful and then kind of creating an inventory versus our personality traits can help us to determine, Okay, are there some things that I can work at? Are there some things that I'm just not going to ever, you know, ever be like that about? And that's fine. That sometimes life is about taking what we're good at, exploiting it and doing the best we can with it, and then not always trying to concentrate and beat ourselves up over our weaknesses, right? We might not ever be strong at some things, and I know that sounds like a cop out, or like we're giving up. We can definitely improve at anything, but some people just beat themselves up their whole lives over things that they're not good at, instead of celebrating the things that they're uniquely good at, and really you know looking deep and finding those things that they are good at, and exploiting that. There's a lot of new literature out right now about kind of this workplace career consulting, where they go into companies, and instead of trying to have people determine what things they're weak at and try to improve those things, that's not the focus at all. What they do is they go in and focus on what people are good at, and focus on how in a team environment using everybody's strengths can really be beneficial for the team, and that we've got to focus on exploit those strengths and focus on that, instead of trying to pick apart everybody's weaknesses and try to be better at those. And it's just an interesting new kind of concept. We always, we'd always tell people, hey, focus on what you're good on, be grateful for what you're good at. You're unique, you've got unique strengths. All that's true, and we'd always say that, but in a work environment, we tended to kind of overlook that and say, well, yeah, you're good at some things, but you need to work on this and this. Okay, focus on these things that you're not so good at. And well, that's great, that we should get better at things that we're not so good at. It's also better even to focus on how to exploit the things that we are good at, and how we can add value to a team based on those strengths, instead of thinking about our weaknesses and wasting time trying to make something that's very weak and not very good, that not very natural for us, better. All right, enough on that. There's the soapbox as far as personality is concerned. Let's talk a little bit about values. What are they? Where do they come from? Some examples. So we've talked a little bit about values. They're things that are important to us, right? Let's say we put a high value on being honest, very high value on being honest, or a very high value on hard work, or a very high value on kindness, being kind to people. So where do those values come from? Again, back to the kind of the nature nurture personality thing. A lot of times it's from really, really important life experiences, kind of watershed moments where something significant happened in our lives, and it set us on a course that made something regarding that experience very important to us. So could be that in high school or junior high or elementary school, we were bullied, right? Well, that experience could be a reason why that's a high value to us, for people to be kind, and for people to, not bully. And maybe you make it a life mission to try to help people, educate, how to deal with bullying and how to eliminate it from some of our schools. So that's just one example, but you can see how different life experiences can form those values, and then can put us on a path where we're very focused on that particular value. There are lots of different values, though, that could potentially be there. And, there's not a right or wrong value. Some of us get caught, Kia, thinking that, because we think honesty is the most important thing, that somehow that's much more important than the next person who says, no, actually just hard work is the most important thing. Or, there's not this hierarchy of most important things that's right or wrong. But everybody has their own hierarchy, right? We list, different values take precedence over others, and it's not that there's one that's good or bad. It's just that we all have this based on our life experiences, and once again back to kind of that nature nurture situation that we've had throughout our lives. So that's where they come from. They come from parents. They come from leaders, different people that we've been around, managers, employers, friends, family. All kinds of people can influence our values. Religion can influence our values significantly. There are all kinds of things that can play a part in what we value, and we've talked about some examples. Now, what do we mean when we talk about corporate culture? What I mean by corporate culture is, what does the company value? Okay, and I'm not talking about just a mission statement that says, hey, we value good customer service and honesty and integrity and good products at a good price. You see all those kinds of of corporate mission statements, and frankly, many companies, if you asked the average employee what their mission statement is, they'd have no clue, right? They don't ever think about it. They don't ever focus on it. They don't ever try to actually, demonstrate it. And so it's worthless. That mission statement doesn't mean anything if it doesn't create what we refer to as a corporate culture, a culture that actually demonstrates the values associated with that company. So just as an example, when Walmart first started with the Waltons, okay, there was a significant company culture of taking pride in doing a great job and a high level of customer service for people at Walmart. And I give that example because a lot of people today would think the exact opposite, right? That there's a corporate culture now at Walmart of low service, of low friendliness, of just all about profits, right? And just get the products out the door type of approach at any cost, even if it means people not having a very good customer service experience. Well, whether or not you agree or disagree with what I just said as far as what people think about Walmart now, I don't think you can disagree with the fact that 30 years ago, the Walmart culture were very well documented. A lot of people would say this, that worked for the Waltons, was a high level of customer service, was a high level of pride in doing a great job helping people, and also a high level of respect for employees and how much they got paid, getting a fair pay, and sharing some of the profitability of the company, which definitely can be argued now that that's just not the case. My point is that cultures can change. Company cultures can change over time. Many times the corporate culture that got a company famous or got a company rich tends to get watered down as they get bigger. Sometimes not, though. You can see strong company cultures in companies like Nordstrom, in companies like Chick-fil-A, In-N-Out. So any industry can have a strong company culture. It can be fast food, it can be retail, it can be anything. But you can feel a consistent value system being demonstrated by employees when there's a strong company culture, okay? And you can feel it when you're part of it as an employee, and you can feel it as a customer. I don't know if you can think of examples of that, Kia, but there are very strong company cultures out there, and then there are company cultures that are actually, that you might think, wow, this is actually a negative company culture, kind of a toxic company culture where there's not respect, there's not high level of customer service, there's not a high level of pride in what they do, there's not kindness, there's not, people going out of their way to try to help and do the right thing. So the reason I bring this up is because if your values system, is one certain way, and you try to work for a company that has a value system that contradicts or is at odds with your value system or with your personality or with things that you value most, the likelihood of you succeeding at that workplace is hampered. It's definitely it can be stopped, okay? And you're going to be at odds, and you're not going to be happy with that particular workplace environment long term. You can make it work as a job, right, for a while, but at some point it would be important for you to try and find both a career environment and a corporate culture that is actually a match with your personality and with your value system. And that's why I bring up corporate culture, because I think it's so important to try to do your homework about where you're going to work long term, right? Because part of being happy and part of getting promoted and part of having, a good career workplace environment is having a match between the company culture that you're associated with and your own personality. Now, having said that, that's different for everybody, right? You can't just say, oh, so and so, he doesn't really like to make people happy, so he probably wouldn't be a good fit for Nordstrom, right? Because they've got such a high level of service, and that would be, us trying to put that on people would never work, right? It's only for each one of us to determine for ourselves, and that's it. We can't judge other people or judge other companies. What we can do is try to find a company that's a good fit for us personally, and we'll know. We'll have a good idea based on working there whether or not the company culture is fitting our values and our value system and personality. Wanted to talk a little bit about ethics because it kind of fits along with this corporate culture discussion. Ethics just have to do with doing the right thing. Okay, so in companies, when we work for places and when companies, their bottom line, their value maximization principle that you learn about in finance is to make profit, right? And to create value for their business. So as a manager, as an employee, as anybody who works for a company, part of the contract that I have with the company when I take a paycheck from them, when I'm getting paid from them, is, even if we don't think about it overtly, is to help maximize value and profitability for the company, okay? Or they shouldn't pay me. And so because of this, what happens sometimes is companies overlook what's ethically right or wrong to do, okay, for for profit, right? So this is the big knock on capitalism, is that capitalism or an economic environment where companies and individuals are highly motivated to make money, right, and to build value and to grow profitability, that many times they'll overlook what's right to do and what's ethically right to do, and they'll step on the environment, they'll step on people, they'll mistreat people, they'll mistreat the environment, they'll mistreat society in general if it means that they can make more profit. And there are lots and lots of examples where companies do this. Okay. Why do I bring it up? Again, because it's part of a company culture. How seriously does the company you work for, take doing the right thing? Okay, would they do the right thing over making money? And this can keep you on the clear in some significant potential problems. For example, if you look at an Enron or a WorldCom from a few years back that all went belly up because they had really unscrupulous owners, that were bilking money and fraudulently taking money from their companies. In hindsight, you could look at those companies and say they ethically, they lacked an ethical system, obviously. I don't know how well you'd have been able to catch that during, while they were around, but it's worth considering, and it's worth keeping an eye open for companies that are willing to step over the rules, step over, what's ethically right or wrong in order to make a profit, because that could put you or the company on a slippery path, to a bad situation. Of course, right? So it goes without saying that that's potentially there. Okay, so we've only got just a few minutes. Wanted to talk a little bit about self-efficacy, which has to do with our confidence, right? That we talked about before. How do we get it? How do we build it? Those are some things that we already alluded to a little bit before. And it goes along with self-actualization, and this is a concept that I hope that you'll spend a little bit of time this week, because we don't have time tonight to talk about it. But the concept of self-actualization is important. It's the idea that we have control of our own destiny. As an employee, many times you feel completely out of control, right? You just have to do whatever somebody tells you to do. The more empowered we feel as an employee, the more self-actualization that can occur within a workplace. Usually there's more satisfaction, usually there's more productivity. And a perfect example of that was an article today on CNBC.com about Warren Buffett as a leader of businesses. He owns a lot of different companies. He's the most successful investor of all time historically. He's a multi-billionaire. But one of the things that this article talked about was that he, as a business leader, allows other people to run their own businesses. He's not a micromanager. He gives suggestions. He's got a lot of good perspective, and obviously he's been highly successful, so he can give a lot of good feedback. But the bottom line is he allows empowerment with folks who work for him, and that empowerment allows self-actualization. That self-actualization allows for some of the most productive workplace environments that exist. because these people are excited about driving their own ship, right? About being in control, about having some control over their own direction, within their workplace. And this article just talked about how a lot of his success comes from allowing people to do something that they do well, right? And not getting in the way and not stopping them or stifling them from having this concept of self-actualization. Of course, attitude is a big part of that. We don't have time to really talk too much about that. The articles this week focus on, like I say, professionalism. We don't need to talk about the examples of it, but one of the concepts, and we'll talk about this a little later in the class, one of the future weeks, is the idea that professionalism has more to do with integrity than it does with how you look. Okay, and I'll just end the class with that. Something to think about. Professionalism has a lot less to do with how you look and what you're wearing than it has to do with workplace integrity. And we'll expand on that concept in future weeks, but just something to start thinking about. All right. Have a great night. Kia, thank you very much for being here and interacting with the class tonight. I appreciate your participation. Have a great week this week. Any questions before we wrap up tonight? Okay. Then get on with your night. Have a wonderful week. Thank you, Kia. I appreciate that. Have a great night. Have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.